Welcome to the Undraped Artist Podcast. Unfortunately, this week my guest fell through, so I don't have a new artist for you. But over the past 10 months or so, many of you have reached out to me and asked if I'm ever going to interview myself on my podcast or have another artist interview me. And the answer is no, because that's just weird. But what you may not know is I've already been interviewed by several other podcasters. One of those podcasters is Andrew Tischler. If you haven't seen his podcast, go check it out. It's called The Creative Endeavor, and you can listen for free wherever you get your podcasts. He's a great interviewer. I had a blast talking to him, and he was kind enough to send me over the audio file, which is what you'll be listening to today. If you'd like to see the video version of this, check him out on Patreon. Again, his name is Andrew Tischler. That's Tischler. So this week, you're going to have to hear a lot more of my voice than you're used to. But hang in there. Next week, we're going to have another great artist on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you enjoyed this interview of yours truly by Andrew Tischler and The Creative Endeavor.
Here's Jeff Hein and The Creative Endeavor. Jeff Hein, welcome to the Creative Endeavor podcast. What a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, look, let's kick things off. People that listen to the show, they know I always like to start off things this way, but let's just kick things off here. I would love to hear about your story. I mean, you've got some amazing paintings in your portfolio, what I've been looking at on the website. I've been following you for ages on social media. How did this all start for you? Where did that art journey first begin, and what was really inspiring you as you were taking those first steps along your artistic path?
You know, that's interesting. I mean, how far back do you want me to go here?
Birth.
Birth. Okay. Well, it's funny. I just took on this student who's 14 years old, and she's filled up like 100 sketchbooks already, and they're unbelievable. And I think, man, that is not, I just, those kind of people just blow my mind, because it's not who I was. In fact, when I was a kid, I always knew I could draw, because when I was in school, I'd rather draw than pay attention. But that was the extent of my drawing. I never drew at home. I'd always just assume go out and play, whatever play was, sports or whatever. I drew so little that when college came around, it was time to apply to college. I told my parents I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to major in art. And my mom kind of laughed and said, "You don't even draw or paint." I'd never painted at that point. And, and part of it was too, I know this sounds really cliche, but we were really poor. I mean, so there were 7 of us, not 7 kids, but 5 kids, 2 parents in a 1,200 square foot house. And my bedroom was a closet. So there was just no place for an easel anyway, even if I wanted to paint. But honestly, I probably wouldn't have anyway. I just wasn't into it, but I knew I could do it. And it always felt like who I was, if that makes any sense. In fact, when I was in the 9th grade, I even had kind of a bummer experience where I had, it was my first art class in the 9th grade in high school. And this guy sitting next to me was on the football team, this big old gruff dude, and he did not care about art. The only reason I bring up the football team is so you can kind of get a picture in your mind. This guy was huge, total sports guy, not a creative person at all. And we had this assignment that we had to do an ad. It was like a drawing advertising class. I was in the 9th grade, I think I mentioned. And we had to do this ad, and it was of a car, and we had to have a person standing next to the car. And then we just had to rule the text with just lines. And so this was my first class, first assignment. I was so excited to be in a drawing class, and I spent so much time on it. I probably was up all night that night before on this thing, and I made it as the best I could. And I have a natural aptitude to this stuff. So it was pretty good for a ninth grader. And I brought it in, and this kid next to me, the football player, he just had a stick figure, and he made a joke about how stupid the assignment was. Literally a stick figure and a box with two circles for wheels. That was his car. So a few days later, we got our grades back, and he had a B plus, and I had a B. And I was a very timid high school kid, so I went into I worked up the courage and went into my teacher's office afterwards and very timidly said to her, "Why did so and so get a B plus and I only got a B? Because I worked really hard on this and he didn't seem to really work very hard." She literally went off, like started literally yelling at me and said, "You have some nerve thinking just because you have talent, you're supposed to get special treatment," blah, 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 and went on and on and on. I was so freaked out that I immediately went to my guidance counselor, went to the office and changed the class, never took an art class again until college. So that was my one and only
What?
art experience until college. Oh yeah, it was brutal. I mean, that woman had some serious
Oh,
issues, and at the
oh,
time I was so freaked out, but now that I'm an adult, I know what was going on with her. I mean, she had some pent up issues with insecurity or something. But
well and
but
truly. What's
so
with our teachers, by the way?
I don't.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, certainly that doesn't represent all art teachers.
For
She
sure, for
she was
sure.
a she was a one of a kind. But
Yeah.
she anyway. But it turned me off. So I had to take requirements. I had to take an art classes. So I would take like a film class or something. I never took drawing or painting again until college. So then I got to college and I was really nervous about it. I thought, man, when, I know I'm good compared to my high school, the kids in high school, but now this is like a real college and like, I'm in an art department now. These are all art majors. And I was super intimidated. And then I got there and I held my own and I was like, gave me some confidence. And I felt like, man, maybe I can do this thing. So I spent a year in college and then I actually served a mission for my church, which was 2 years. And then I got cancer, which was another year and a half. So I didn't get back to college after that first year until I was 23 years old, I think. So I kind of took a really long road. So then when I was 23, by this time I'm in Utah. I'm originally from New York. And I enrolled in a community college and then I took a year there and they told me that I should be at the university. Ironically, they said I was too advanced for the Salt Lake Community College. So they said, go to the university. And I got to the university, was really disappointed because the Salt Lake Community College teachers were better, but they're far too humble. So ultimately, I ended up dropping out of college and not on purpose, but I had a solo show that was actually a scholarship that I got from an independent donor who chose his favorite artist of that particular year and would grant them a scholarship to have a solo show. And that year, he actually chose two of us. So we had a two-person show. And after that show, because my credits didn't line up right, I was still technically not a graduate. It was meant for a senior, but I was a senior, but I technically didn't graduate. But after that show, that summer, my career took off and I never went back to school, never got back to school. I always intended to. And then, it's been 20 years now, literally to the year. So I
Oh,
don't think I'm going to get
wow.
a degree, looks like. But
Well,
I was really fortunate. Things
mm,
just worked out for me. That show was lined up in a local gallery that just really did a lot of work to get my name out there. I mean, they really got on the phone. I think a lot of artists have the misfortune of just going into a gallery where they do nothing but hang it on the wall. And I think that this dealer just got on the phone. Like, I mean,
mm,
there were
that's
times I'd
great.
bring a painting in there and I know I'd see him get on the phone as I was walking out of the gallery. And then he'd come running after me and say, "I just sold it." And I literally hadn't even gotten to my car yet. I mean, he was working so hard for me and
That's
it was a
awesome.
huge blessing. This guy's like 97 years old now. It's super sad. I wish we were still working together, but and then another gallery, which is now out of business, they came to Utah at the time, right when I was graduating. Utah had developed a reputation for grooming a lot of artists for some reason. So galleries were actually scouting the state. And this one gallery, it's actually Went Gallery, some people might know them from back in the day. They came to Utah and were looking for artists, and they found me and asked me to join their gallery, and they really helped me out a lot too. They ended up burning me pretty bad, but they helped me out a lot before that happened. So that's really it in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot of things in between, but that's the short story.
That's it's phenomenal to hear your story. I mean, there's so many things right there that we could just pick up. There's so many threads, and there's a few things that I want to ask you though. First of all, really glad that you're here because that would have been really freaky.
Oh,
Going
you mean because of the
through,
cancer?
yeah,
Yeah,
going
yeah,
through cancer, but you're obviously better, and
yeah.
that would have thrown such a spanner in the works. So I'm sorry to hear that, but really super stoked that you're better, right?
Well, thank you. Yeah, me too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a few things I want to ask you about that because I obviously, I, I I reflect a lot of what you said. I mean, my story with dealing with school and galleries, it's very similar to yours in many ways. But I'm really curious about the art school experience because if there's one thing I get asked more than just about anything else, it's like, hey Andrew, you went to art school. I want to go to art school too. And I'm always saying, hey, look, art school is not necessarily art school. There's differences in the types of education that you're going to get.
Hmm.
And I went to a university, to a tertiary institution, and it was really modern, really kind of abstract contemporary stuff. I didn't vibe with it at all. I was trying to be something I wasn't. And it took me a little while to recover from that experience. Consequently, now I just say to people, don't go to art school unless you can find an atelier or unless you can find somebody
Hmm.
like Jeff Hein to teach you. You want to be doing something that's going to carry your skills, and then you get to decide what you want to say with those skills as your tools in your tool belt. But get the actual skill and get the knowledge
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Don't just go and learn how to be interesting in a conversation by throwing out a few esoteric words or whatever, because
Hmm.
some obscure Korean artist whose installation work involves crumpled bed sheets, or look at the latest project that they have. It's all about licking pavement, and
I feel
it's
like you're not making these up.
dude. I'm not.
Oh man.
I'm not. Listen, the gig's
They're
up.
far too specific.
Dude, if you can tape a banana to a wall and
Oh my goodness.
if that's taken
Yeah.
seriously, oh, come on. Okay, it's over. It's
Hmm.
over. It's a
Hmm.
joke. And
Hmm.
the people I think end up being the butt of the joke. It's like, what are they going to fall
Hmm.
for this time? So I just don't participate in it, but that's kind of the education I got. What
Yeah.
did you find? Take us back to those days when you were studying. Did you feel a little bit like a fish out of water in that institution? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
I know you didn't get your degree, but I mean, you probably at this
Well, I
point would
didn't,
never
but I
even
was in
look
school.
back.
I
You know?
didn't get a degree, but I was in school a long time. I mean, I can't remember the numbers, but I went to three schools and the first two didn't transfer to the third. So I have enough credits for probably almost two bachelor's degrees, and yet I still didn't get a bachelor's. It's just none of them transferred. So I was in school a long time. So I have a lot of experience with bad and good. And it the, my first school was it was called Rick's College at the time. Now it's BYU Idaho, and they were sort of this weird little school in what's the name of the city now? Rexburg, Idaho. It's just like out in the middle of nowhere, and they had these gems of teachers. Like, why are they in Rexburg, Idaho? These great teachers. The teacher I studied with was Griffin. His name, I'm losing his first name now, but his last name was Griffin, Professor Griffin, and he was just insanely difficult and insanely motivating and very talented, particularly for a kid with no experience. I look at it back now, I still think he's talented, but at the time I was starstruck, because I'd never seen anyone draw as well as this teacher, being a 17-year-old with no experience. And then again, I don't want to demean what he's doing. He's still a great, he is and was a great draftsman. But at the time I was just absolutely starstruck, right? But he was mean. He was mean in a funny way where he would really just rip students apart, like he'd come up behind them and say, Aren't you embarrassed of that? Like, that is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Or he'd say, and so you're majoring in art, why? I mean, he was just so demeaning.
No,
Yeah, but you know
no.
what? But here's the thing he did that I loved, which was the exact antithesis to this teacher that I dealt with in the ninth grade. Maybe it's because of this ninth grade teacher that I really, this resonated with me. I mean, maybe I'm giving her too much credit that she was even thinking this much about it, but I'm sure you're familiar with this mentality of grade everyone so that everyone's feelings aren't hurt. Like make sure everyone, particularly in the arts, make sure everyone leaves class feeling warm and fuzzy. And I mean, it's almost beyond grading on effort. It's grading on emotions, you know. And this guy was an absolute grade on quality and success, not effort, and certainly not feelings, right? And so if you did a bad drawing, it didn't matter if you worked on it for a month. It didn't matter. It was still a bad drawing. You know, and to me that resonated because, you know, if I got a bad grade in my history class, it didn't matter if I read the textbook 6 times, I still failed. So why are other students getting better grades than me when I'm doing better work in the art class, right? So this guy, he took the quote unquote best student in the class, gave them an A plus, and then graded everyone down from them. They were the standard by which he graded everybody else. And between his insults and his grading philosophy, I was so unbelievably motivated in his class. Like I am going to be that A plus student, and there's no one who's going to stop me. I mean, I was absolutely determined to be the A plus. And also, when he insulted me, I was absolutely determined to make him eat his words, right? And some people don't thrive in those situations, but for me, he was the perfect style of teacher. Like every time he insulted me, I got more and more pissed and wanted to prove him wrong, you know? So it was excellent. And
That's
I've stayed in
awesome.
touch with
That's
him a
so
little bit
awesome.
because
Mm.
he was just, I mean, he's not a well known artist at all, but he was just the perfect teacher for me. I'll never forget it. And I've told him thank you 1,000 times. He probably gets annoyed with me because it's been 25 years. But then when I went to the community college, I had a few really good teachers there. But then, like I said, it was only one semester and then or maybe 2 quarters, and then they told me to move on. And then I went to the University of Utah and it was just a bunch of frou-frou, like, you know, like you described, just how can we express ourselves and without substance, without craftsmanship, without, you know, it's simply nothing more than content. In fact, we had a final exam one year in one of my classes. That was a drawing class. And in that final, we had to do a drawing and then bring it in framed and then do a presentation on the drawing in front of the whole class. Again, it's my personality to try hard. You know, I'm that way. I want to do well. So I worked all night. And at the time, my wife and we were married pretty young and poor, and we lived in one bedroom, not one bedroom apartment, but one bedroom of a basement of a friend of ours. And so I'm working next to the bed while she's trying to sleep, and she's not happy about it. She's begging me to turn off the light, and it's 1 o'clock, and then it's 2 o'clock, and then it's 3 a.m. And I'm getting more and more tired and starting to make irrational decisions. So I was doing a figure drawing and it wasn't going well. And it's early in the morning. So I start cutting pieces off of it. And I don't know if you've ever done this before, but it's like this isn't the only time this has happened to me where I start doing irrational things because I'm tired or whatever. But so I start cutting things off of it. Next thing you know, the only thing that's left on this thing, it started out like 24 by 36. By the time I'm done, at 3 a.m., it's about 3 by 3 inches. I have cut it down to nothing. It's confetti. And you know what's left? It's just the butt crack. That's all it is. It looks like a Y. That's it's just a Y. So I'm like, I am so screwed. This is the final. It's like half my grade. And so I brought it in the next day. I bring it into this class before this one, and one of my classmates who shares both classes starts laughing at me, and he goes, "And you didn't even frame it. You are so screwed." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm gonna BS my way out of this. You just watch." So I go into the next class. Again, it's not framed; it's just a loose piece of paper, and it's time for me to get up in front of the whole class and give a speech. These are grown ups, by the way, 18 and older, right? These aren't just little kids. I'm fooling here. So I knew my audience, so I came up with some concept of some political issue that related to the female butt crack at the time. I don't know what, this is 20 some years ago. I figured out a way to tie it in. And then I talked about some fragility of something, and that's why I didn't frame it. And I got a standing ovation from the class. The teacher stood up. He shook my hand and he said, "That is the best art piece we have ever seen in my entire career." And I got an A plus. And from that point on, I just stopped doing it. So what I started doing from that point on was just BSing through all the assignments and getting good grades for the first time because I was playing the game. And then I'd go home and I'd give myself real assignments. I'd open up books of great painters and try and figure out what they were doing with my own assignments. And like one time I brought a rubber ducky to a sculpture class, and I gave some long story about what the rubber ducky meant to me, and I got an A plus. I didn't even sculpt it. It was just a rubber ducky off my shower. But I did tie a bandana around it.
Well, of course. I mean,
it was a tiny little bandana. My wife told me not to do it. She said it was unethical. And I said, "Jen, it's not unethical if they believe it." I mean, I've been to the Jeff Koons exhibits. I saw the vacuum cleaner. How is my rubber ducky any less of art than his vacuum cleaner?
Don't get me started on Koons. Please don't get me started on Koons.
But she told me it was unethical. I'm like, "I'm sorry, Jen. If they believe it's art, that's the art world, and that's the game we're playing." So I got an A plus in that, and I started teaching myself, and and it's great because it's not great, but what came from it is that I have a huge library in my mind and on video and in writing of assignments that worked for me that I use on my own students now, or that I give to my own students. So, and you said something that I use, a phrase that I use all the time. "It took me a while to recover," you said, "from my schooling." I've said that so many times. It took me years to recover, because even though I knew that I was learning a lot of ridiculous things, it's hard sometimes to know just how much they stick. Like I remember 8 years after leaving school, I was working on a painting, and I made a stroke a certain way, and it looked better than I'd been doing before. And it occurred to me that I hadn't done it before because I was told in college that it was wrong to do it that way. My teacher in college said you should never touch a stroke again. You put it down and you leave it alone, which could not be more. I mean, that is completely the opposite of how I approach painting now. But it took 8 years to discover that he was just stating opinion and not fact.
So I would love to get into how you approach painting now. I want to geek out about the technical stuff, but I'm just going to say on that note, you and me, we ought to start right now an online group, Art Graduates Anonymous, recovery program.
Yeah, okay? Seriously.
Hi, my name's Andrew, and I'm a recovering art graduate, and
that's too funny.
I have a bunch of really bad ideas. I remember though, like it was probably a good year for me where I was just going, who am I and what am I doing? I got out of the university program, and then I was trying to make art, real art. And for some reason, it's like there's this idea, because something's been done before, and they threw out this thing as just a kind of like just a throwaway line, as a way to just denigrate an entire genre. But they just said, "Oh, you're just painting cows and gum trees, cows and gum trees." And in Australia with the Heidelberg School, it's cows and gum trees is all about those quintessential Australian landscapes, that Federation type landscape. So it had already been done. It's kind of like your in the US, it would be the Hudson River School. In Canada, it'd be Group of Seven, although they kind of got it weird in some places. In the UK, it might have been the Victorians or whatever, or Impressionists or whatever. So this is a knee-jerk reaction to that coming out. It's like, no, it's been done before. It was done by the Heidelberg School. But I'm like, hang on a second. No, I remember at the time being in university going, no, this matters to me. I really love this stuff. I want to do this. And it's like, but you can't do that because that's already been said. But now I'm just in the position where it's like, well, I don't care. You got to paint for you. And I just decided, it took me a long time to just go, I want to paint a landscape, and that's okay. I don't have to
Yeah.
tear it in half and sprinkle it with hundreds of thousands, and then, get the fire extinguisher out. And, I don't have to do anything weird and wonderful. It's fine. Just doing what you
Right.
want to do.
I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert at this, but it seems really obvious to me. But maybe it was the 1950s ish, maybe 40s was the last original time for anything, art, music, clothing. Like, I mean, people have mullets right now from the 80s. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and then
I,
when
I
I was,
swear, I swore that was never going to come back. It's
no, I know,
back. It's back.
but but
How?
that never used to happen. That never used to happen pre 19th or 20th century,
Yeah.
21st century. We have literally run out of ideas. And so everything is recycling. When I was a kid, I listened to my father's music was an absolute joke. I mean, he was listening to the Oak Ridge Boys and I was listening to the Violent Femmes or Depeche Mode, right? It's like, but now I listen to the same music as my kids because it's the same stuff that I listened to back in. They literally like Depeche Mode. Like I'm like because their music doesn't sound that much different anymore, and
Uh-huh.
that's the way painting has become. Where it's like the schools they want you to do something different, but there's nothing left to do. The only thing that there is left to do is to stop thinking about doing something so different. You know,
Hmm.
it's there really isn't. I mean, once you've displayed a urinal, you're out of ideas. You
Yeah.
know, so that doesn't mean that there can't be uniqueness in
Hmm.
art because just like you and I mean, there's what 7 billion people. I don't even know how many people are there in the world now. Are we up to 8 yet? Anyway, there's billions of people in the world,
Hmm.
and yet we all have a different face. I mean, how hard is it to find someone that looks just like us? It's impossible. So, and I believe that we also have a different way of making marks. We have a very subtle. We each have a subtle aesthetic. We have our own tastes. So we don't. I don't think we have to set our work on fire and then urinate on it in order to be different. All we have to do is just be ourselves. You know, it's like, and yeah, art school was certainly didn't see things that way. And that, when I teach, that's the number one thing not the number one, but that's one of the big things I try and pound home into my students. And also that I make an effort to stay out of the way of my students in that I don't want to take away their natural personal aesthetic because I think that we all have our own way of seeing the world. We have our own way of making marks. We have our own way of walking. We have our own way of moving. We have our own mannerisms, and that translates into our art. So I feel so strongly about that when I teach, I'm very careful to stay out of their way. So I never say make a mark like this. I never say your brushstrokes should look like that, or it's whatever. All I care about is that you are looking at value, hue, chroma, shape, proportion, and so on and so forth. As how you do it, I don't care if you put the brush between your toes or you paint with it stuck in your ear. It really doesn't matter to me, and that's what's going to make each of my students unique is just being able to maintain their own way of moving and their own way of mark making. And it's been really interesting because I've been teaching for, let me see, 20 years, I guess, privately. And I've never had two students look the same, like never in 20 years. In fact, I've never had, well, I can't say never. I did have one copycat, but other than one copycat, which was deliberate, I've never had one student look like me in 20 years, not a single one. And
When
so,
you say copycat, was that somebody who attended your class and then took your techniques and just ripped them off and was a
oh,
mini
they
Jeff
literally were
Hein?
copying paintings. They were literally copying paintings. They
Oh,
they
wow.
they weren't just copying my way of painting. They were literally copying paintings.
And then selling
So
them?
yeah. I'm not
Oh,
under my
wow.
name, under their own name, but it was a
Wow.
conscious effort to copy me. It wasn't like I had taught them to paint like me, right?
Yeah.
They took a few classes and then went off and started selling work that they were copying off the internet that looked just like mine. But that's a whole different thing, and we don't need to get into that. But as far
Oh,
as normal
let's. I
students,
because I'm always no. Look, man, I tell you what. Like, if a doorway opens, I want to walk through it, but I don't
yeah,
want to get
yeah.
caught in the weeds either. I'm always so curious to hear about how people deal with copycats because I've had a few of those. I'll give you an example. I had a website in China. You could go onto this website, right? It was a Chinese website, and you could order your Andrew Tischler at any size, and they were ripping stuff
Oh
off my
yeah.
website. You could just order whatever painting, and we shut them down. But it was I didn't have the presence of mind at the time to go ahead and order one because I was thinking, what a time saving exercise. I imagine the amount of work I could get done if I just had a dozen people working for me making my paintings. This is great.
Seriously, right?
Just
No,
outsource
I've had that
everything.
happen to
But
me too. Yeah.
oh man, straight up,
Yeah.
it burned. And then I had somebody who was really, and I'm not going to mention their name, very well known and still very well known, take one of my paintings and straight up reproduce part of it for a cover of one of the books that they had made. And
Oh,
and
ouch.
I got in touch with him, and the really thing that really burned about it was he was a childhood hero of mine. And
Oh,
I just emailed him and I said, dude, straight up, love your work. And I emailed him a picture of my painting and then a picture of his book cover. I'm just like, oh, it just got me,
oh
dude.
no,
It
that
got me.
hurts.
And it's just one of my heroes
Yeah.
just came from there, just crashing down. Like, and then I started seeing examples of that everywhere else. But everybody loves this guy. No, I'm not going to mention the name, and don't even guess if you're
No,
listening to
I'm
this.
not gonna
Yeah,
guess.
no, not you. Like, but people are listening, going,
Yeah,
they'll
yeah.
be in the comments going, I think I don't. No, you don't. You won't have any idea who it is. But it's always interesting because that's out there, right? And now with the
Yeah.
internet and images being all around, it's the opportunities for that happening are everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And I got enough copycats that's the reason I completely switched my style. Well, that's not the only reason. There were a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I completely switched my style back in 2007 was because it was too easy to copy. I'm like, I'm getting frustrated with this. But also I was ready to move on, but it was definitely one of the things that influenced the decision. But yeah, anyway, this artist, I wish I could say I handled it well. I was young and hot tempered at the time, so I probably didn't handle it with very much grace. I'd probably handle it a little better today. It turns out I've learned from experience that it doesn't hurt you that much. When I was young and I was scared and I was just trying to make my way in the world, if someone copied me, it freaked me out, like they were going to ruin my career and everything. But as I've gotten older and I've been doing this for a while, I realized that, we're not that fragile.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
hear your whole life, starving artist, starving artist, starving artist. And then
Right. Right.
after 20 years of painting, I don't feel as fragile as I did when I
Mhm.
was completely, hammered with that stereotype as a student. So I think I'd handle it differently now. But at the time, yeah, no, it wasn't. I didn't handle it very well.
When did you ever adopt that persona of starving artist? I mean, so I hear from your story that you struggled early on, and it was very much there were trials there. A lot of artists go through that,
Yeah.
but what tends to happen, I think, with a lot of people, and culturally, it's just out there that the starving artist is a thing. But I found now that look, it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
The amount of artists I talk to, there's a completely different story there. But what's really interesting about this podcast as well is people can hear how many different avenues to success there are. And this idea of starving artists is a myth. Some people choose to do that, and
Yeah.
that they can, but it's an absolute myth. There are opportunities everywhere. So, how long did it take, or what was the thing that allowed you to just click out of that mode and find your feet and
I'm-
start moving towards? Because look, I don't. I'm just going to assume from the outside looking in, dude, I am super inspired by you. The website looks great. You're teaching. I'm just going to say I would love to do some teaching course. Promise not to copy. Yeah, I'd love to do some teaching and hear about the way you do things, because I think you're up there with some of the best portrait artists working.
We'll be right back after this short testimonial by one of my online mentorship students. If you're interested in learning more about how you could study with me, either online or in person, check out heinatelier.com. That's HeinATELIER.com.
I've been doing Jeff's online mentorship program for about a year now, and it is awesome. Everything is online, super streamlined. If you can be there, I mean, you have the ability to talk to him once a week and he can review your work and help you. If you can't be there, it's pre-recorded. You can go back and even re-watch things if you missed something during class or couldn't be there. So the online portion of it is almost better than real life because you can always go back to it, which is awesome. The demos are recorded. It's just like all available whenever you need it. And I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4 and my time is limited and it's also very interrupted. And so to be able to go back has been clutch for me. And you get to work with Jeff Hein, who's awesome. He's tough. The assignments are simple, but difficult, and they're difficult to make us all better. And he's able to give us these assignments, coach us through it, help us stay excited to progress. And so it's just been a great experience. I am so grateful that he has been willing to take time away from his own art to offer all of us to have it. So if you're thinking about doing it, it's amazing.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. So how, I guess, how did you find your feet here? How did you click into that mode?
I'm thinking about myself here. So I'm not struggling with words as much as I am just thinking back and looking at myself from outside. And if I look at myself, my younger self from the outside, I'd have to describe myself as stupid confident. I wouldn't, I definitely had insecurities and I always will. I mean, I think even the most confident people can have insecurities, but I never thought I'd fail. Like I just always knew I would be an artist. I don't know where it comes from. My parents begged me not to study art. I remember one time I was newly married. I was well into school. I sold a painting for $200 and my mom said, who in their right mind would spend $200 on a painting? And I said to my mom, I know, can you believe that? Like I said, we're lower middle class, she just didn't get it. And I said, Mom, people spend tens of thousands on paintings. Little did I know they spend millions on paintings. I was even naive, right? I said, Mom, people spend tens of thousands on painting. And she goes, oh, Jeff, don't be so naive. And it
Wow.
was literally within that year that I sold a painting for 35 grand. And my mom
Dude.
begged, I'm not lying.
Oh,
And my
well
mom
done.
begged for my forgiveness.
Wow.
And I love her to death. She always wanted what was best for me. Both my parents did. It was not obviously not right. She just didn't know, but she begged for she's like, Jeff, I could have ruined your life. I could have ruined your life. But I think I was really fortunate to just have this feeling that it was going to work out. And I don't know where it came from. I really can't. Cause I mean, I knew the stereotype, but I always had this sort of bite me attitude. It might've been just where I came from. I mean, I was a very religious Mormon kid in New York, just outside New York City. And I spent my whole life being ridiculed and told what I wasn't and what I should be, So I just developed this bite me attitude. And I think that the only thing I can guess is that it sort of applied to my career. People were just like, you can never make it. And I'm like, well, bite me, I'll make it, But I don't know. I mean, it's hard to really analyze yourself, and I was really lucky. I think that confidence served me well because I never really did have a starving period. I think when I finished that scholarship or when I had that one man show, I was still a student. And by the end of that year, my wife quit her job and I was supporting our family. So it happened really fast for me. I was really fortunate and lucky. And, and I tell students, I know that there are talented people that don't make it so I want to preface this next statement with that. I know there are exceptions to this, so I don't want to be insensitive, right? There are talented everything that don't make it in their chosen field, right? For whatever reason. And the thing is, there's a lot more than being a painter and making it in this field. I mean, if you're shy as all get out and you never leave your studio, you're not going to make it, even if you're Michelangelo, right? So there are other things, but I always tell my students, because they're all afraid and they buy into that stereotype, right? I say to them, well, let's put it this way. If every person who's ever put on a Band-Aid and read a few health magazines and claimed they were interested in medicine and could call themselves a doctor, then we'd have a stereotype starving doctor, right? But that's the problem, is the artist is the artist. That term is the most overused, underrated word in the English language. You know, it's like if you draw a picture, it doesn't matter how good it is, people call you an artist. And so, of course, there are starving artists. Of course, there are millions of starving artists, you know, because it's the one thing that you can be called and not actually be in our society. You know, I've been painting for 20 years and I still don't know if I'm an artist, right? That's for history to
Really?
decide.
Wow.
And yet I know 4-year-olds that think they're artists, right?
Right. Right.
It's just that's, you know, if you look up in the dictionary, one of the definitions, it's been a while since I've read it, but one of the definitions is someone who's a master of their craft. So to say you're an artist is to make that claim you're a master of your craft. And so it is an overly used word, right? And everyone's an artist. So therefore, we're going to have a lot of starving artists. But I fully believe that those who have truly mastered their craft tend to do pretty well in this field. But they're not as common. They're not that common, right? People who really, really master the craft. That's not common. It's hard to do.
It is very hard to do. And let me
Yeah.
ask you about that word, because that's a word that I struggle with personally, is master. Because look, I read the YouTube comments and I got a lot of very sweet people following me, very kind people, and they're telling me stuff that I don't deserve.
Yeah, I know.
Which is
Same here.
it just, and and a lot of them mean it. They're very genuine, and it just blows me away. It floors me, and it just, to me, it just means like, Andrew, you've got to show up with everything you've got. And
Yeah.
I tend to respond, you know, for the most part, just say, oh, well, look, thank you very much. I don't want to just shut down what they're saying. You know, they feel moved by what they're watching or whatever. I'm super grateful for that. But there are people out there who's like, oh, Andrew, you know, you've mastered this thing. Dude, I am so far from mastery. I know, like, within myself, there's so much to know. Once you gain a little bit of knowledge, I heard this analogy once, and it's a bit like a light in a dark room. That knowledge is like this, where you know, if it's just a tiny little light, the periphery is that of the known and the unknown is very small and tight with just a little bit of knowledge. But the bigger it gets, the bigger the boundary of the known and unknown is. So that unknown part becomes so much bigger. So the more you know, the more unknown there is. And
I know, it's ridiculous.
You suddenly realize
and frustrating.
There's no end to it. Hey, there's no end to it. And so I'm looking at this going, man, but now that used to depress me, but now I'm thinking, I hope I never get to the end of this, because this experience of learning about it is cool. So let me ask you, like,
Yeah.
so, because I look at, okay, right now, for instance, I got your website open up in this other tab, and I'm clicking through some images while we're talking here. This portrait of the little girl, is that your daughter?
Which one?
Absolutely
Which one is that?
beautiful. I wish I could turn the screen. I don't see a
Well, just
title on this.
describe it.
It's about fifth image in, and a little girl, probably about 7 or 8 years old, charcoal on paper, 16 by 12 inches. Stunning, dude, stunning.
Oh, I don't even remember which one that is, but yeah.
Well,
It's probably not my daughter. I don't think I have a charcoal of my daughter online.
I'm looking at it just going, that's charcoal. That's nuts, dude. That's
Isn't it
absolutely
weird that
nuts.
you can make pictures out of dirt?
Yeah,
It
straight
always
up.
blows my mind.
Straight up, you know.
Yeah,
I
it's
was
so
talking
weird.
I was talking to Christopher Remmers about this, saying, you know, it's the
Yeah.
most primitive thing you can imagine. It's like you're pushing colored mud around on a bit of cloth with a stick with some hair
Yeah.
sticking to the end of it. It's so primitive. We haven't,
It's so bizarre.
dude,
Yeah.
we haven't come very much further than the caves of chewing up ochre in our mouth, putting our hand up on the cave wall and going, you know, and
But
there's,
and just how well it works, particularly with
Yeah,
oil
man.
painting. It's such a primitive medium, and yet it's
Yeah.
like there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
So
Yeah.
how are you
Well-
finding this journey towards mastery?
Well, you know, I
Loaded
just
question.
mentioned I don't even know if I'm an artist, so therefore
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know if I've mastered it. You know,
Exactly.
so I'd have to put a giant quotes around that term. But but I think that anyone who has mastered it is going to be successful. And then there are those who, like myself, who I don't know if I have, who are, good enough to have made it. Right. So, I agree with you. It's like the more the more you know that you don't know. Right. I remember when I was when I was newly married and in college, I remember doing a portrait of my wife in graphite. And this is some of that stupid confidence that I had. And I just thought I was the greatest thing ever. I drew that thing and I'm like, dang, man, that looks just like her. And it did look like her. But I look back at that portrait, it's in my basement right now. And every now and then when I'm moving stuff around, I'm like, oh, there it is. And it's so much less advanced than what I'm doing now. And yet I hate my drawings now. And I thought I was God's gift to drawing back then, and now I'm like, oh, I wish I could draw better. And like you said, it's a, maybe you didn't put it quite this way, but what I gathered from what you said is it's a kind of a blessing because, that it motivates you. Knowing you don't know motivates you to learn. We've all met those artists that think they've got it all and therefore they never move on. They never move forward because they can't be taught. Right. And you never want to fall into that trap. But the downside of that is you never love what you do. You might get fleeting moments where you're like, oh, that's not bad. Right. But if you love what you do too much, you don't want to improve. So it's a love-hate relationship that I have with striving for mastery. Sometimes I wish I was content with what I already have, but then I would never grow, So yeah, it's quite the journey.
I
You know,
I love the doing, not
yeah.
necessarily what I do, but just the act of doing it. That's where I try to put my focus, to be actively engaged in the making of the thing, whether it's a drawing or a painting or maybe a digital whatever. Getting caught up in the process, I think that's where my jam is now. Whereas
Oh, that's funny.
if I fixate on the actual end product, I tear my hair out because I'm looking at my drawings just going, oh, I suck. I just,
Oh
then it's
man.
like the next one, the next one, the next one, So
Yeah.
I try to just focus on, no, I am drawing, therefore it's cool. And I'm going to learn something and I'm going to apply it to the next one. Just focus on the doing. But that's just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mentioned earlier that I didn't draw much as a kid. And it's interesting because I envy people like you because I don't really enjoy the doing that much.
Really?
No, I really don't. I mean, I have
Okay.
my moments. Well, let me rephrase that. I like the overall lifestyle. Like I
Mhm.
wouldn't trade my life for any other life, right?
Okay.
I like the overall lifestyle. I do want to get to work on Monday and work, but I don't want to paint every day. I need some variation. Like,
Right. Okay.
and some artists just crave it, and I'm just like, oh, I'm bored. I just want to get on. I just want to get this thing done. But I'm motivated enough to do it well that I just suffer through it
That's
because I
so
want.
interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
my main
Okay.
motivation is the accomplishment, not the process. And I'm kind of envy people that really enjoy the process. And I'm that way with everything. I have lots of hobbies, and it's always about the end product. It's like I guess I'm a materialistic person. I want the thing at the end of the path more than I enjoy the path. Even if I'm selling that thing and I'm not going to get to
Yeah.
keep it, there's something about the fulfillment of having created the thing
Mhm.
that is more that I crave more than I crave the experience along the way.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
Yeah.
strange. I know.
Yeah.
I
But
wish I had that more, but
I heard that once with a guy that was a hero of mine, and he even put there in his artist statement that he hated to paint. Just could not stand painting, but he had to do it, and he was great. He was an
yeah, that's
absolute.
me.
He was a dynamite painter, but yeah, he just kept showing up because it's like, no, I'm gonna get this. And look, I'm not gonna say that always I'm enjoying the process, but it does take work. I'm curious though. So if you're like this with other hobbies, what are some of those other hobbies that you have? Because I'm
Oh man,
always
I'm so
uh,
distracted.
no. I love this because I don't just paint and make videos and stuff online. There's other stuff I love to do, but I'm curious to hear about what other artists you're into.
Well, so there's a shot of the studio a little bit. You can see I don't know if you can make it out, but there's lots of equipment back
Yeah,
there.
man. Yeah,
I've
yeah.
got in this studio, I've got a wood shop, a metal shop, a leather shop. I've got
Oh,
7
dude.
sewing machines. I've got
All right.
everything you can imagine. It's like Santa's workshop. Like Sean
That's
Cheatham, I
awesome.
like to make knives. I
Mhm.
like doing all kinds of metal work
Mhm.
and woodworking and lots of stuff. I do electronics. I've got my whole studio all pimped out with weird little electronic devices to make things easier. Yeah, I'm very distracted person. And I've made tons of different I like engineering things. I've got very unique easel contraptions and other unique tools in here that other artists don't have. And it's just I lack his genius, but I relate to Da Vinci in that he struggled to get anything done because he was always
Yeah.
doing other things. That's me.
Dude,
Like
dude.
yeah, I'm always
Yeah.
distracted. Always. This morning I woke up and I know I had to start a painting today. And I was looking in my sketchbook and I'm like, I could make a better sketchbook than this. I think that's what I'll do today. you know, and I know I need to be painting today. But so I
Wow.
decided maybe I'll make a new leather sketchbook with a different way to hold my tools. I didn't do that because I ended up on the phone all day, but that's typically what ends up happening with me.
and, and now you're spending time with us here on the
No, it's
Creative
cool.
Endeavor
It's an
podcast.
honor and a
So,
pleasure.
oh man, no, the pleasure's all
Yeah.
mine. Seriously, that is so interesting. So, because I do remember seeing, now that you mention it, I remember seeing stuff on your Instagram where you were made a couple of posts about some other stuff. Weren't you tricking out your van, or like you were doing
Oh
something
man, I
with it?
love my van. Yeah,
Dude,
that
like
van is
that was
so cool.
badass. So tell me about
Oh,
that. Is this an art van that you're kind of traveling
yeah.
around? Oh, okay. Tell me all about it.
This van, I wish I could show it somewhere. Like there was a way to show it because I'm so proud of it. But it took me, I think I'm done with it. It's a kind of the running joke in my family that I'm never done with it. But it took me full time about 9 months, and then just working on it here and there for the rest of the time. And it's I think the last thing I did on it was about the 2-year mark. And I put a lot of time and money into that, but I did everything in it, from the electronics, the plumbing, building the cabinets. I did all kinds of fiberglass work, everything. But it's like a van like you've never seen because it's got all this custom fiberglass in it. So it looks like a car instead. So there's curves in it instead of like you typically see when someone builds out a van, it looks like a house on wheels, right? I wanted to make it still look like a vehicle. So it's got curves. But anyway, it's the reason I made it is because, like I said, I wanted to start landscape painting, but when I had cancer, I lost most of my intestines. So I can't really go out on my own very much for health reasons. So because I can't just leave my easel and then have it be stolen, if I have an emergency. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but so I've never been able to plein air paint. And I really wanted to learn to plein air paint and experience being outside. So I just made basically a camper, not a camper, but a studio on wheels with all the comforts of home in it, so that I can just pull over somewhere and plein air paint, and not have to worry about any of those health issues. So
That's amazing,
I
man.
love it. I love it.
They say
I
that
used it a lot
necessity.
last year.
They say necessity is the mother of invention, don't they? And that's
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So you've been taking it out now, and you've gotten some use out of it with the plein air.
Yeah,
A
I've
little.
probably done 30 or 40 paintings out of it. I haven't this
Fantastic.
winter much, but yeah, it's been great. I love it.
That's awesome, man. And I've got to ask you this. I'm getting addicted to sketchbooks. I've just got the sketchbooks you buy off the shelf, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Please, you're probably going to be like Sean Cheatham, and you're going to want $2,000 per sketchbook or knife. Like when I had Sean Cheatham on the podcast, right? I was saying, dude, that palette knife was so good. Like, what would you
It's
sell
so
that
cool.
for? And he's like, I'm probably not going to sell it. I'm like, no. It's like, well, what would you want? He said, I'd probably have to get there. I can't remember what he said, but it was ridiculous. And fair enough too. It's a handmade palette
Oh,
knife.
there's so much work.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Well, wasn't
It's
it
like,
Damascus too?
yeah.
Wasn't it Damascus?
I think so.
Yeah,
It just
was
had this
ridiculous.
beautiful marble pattern. I was just looking at
Yeah.
it going, that is the coolest dang palette knife I ever seen. But what do you make sketchbooks for other artists?
No, I can't afford to. Yeah, so the one, so
Yeah.
you should go to my Instagram, Jeff Hein Studio.
Okay.
That's where, because you know how finicky Instagram is. If you post
Yeah, man.
anything that's not paintings, you drop like 1,000 followers overnight.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I opened a new account that's Jeff Hein Studio, which is all my little inventions and stuff.
Mhm.
I don't post on it very often, so you're not going to see a ton of stuff. But I think I've got a bunch of stuff, a few things on there that I've made. But like the sketchbook I use now, well, the main one that I use took me like 40 hours to make, and it's like $400 worth of materials. I mean, it's a pretty
Wow.
fancy thing.
Dude.
It's a passion project. It's not lucrative. I could never make money on it. I'd have to sell it for a
Dude,
fortune.
if I ever had one of those, I would never draw on it because I could never think of anything good enough to put on those pages. Be like,
Well,
oh, I
that's the
ruined
thing.
it. I ruined this book. Oh man,
Well,
it's
that's part
crap.
of the brilliance of this. Not saying I'm brilliant, but that's part of what's cool about this is like it's not technically a sketch book. The one I'm talking about is a sketch case where
Mhm.
you open it up and it's got an easel like thing inside it, and then when you open up the easel, there's loose paper behind it, and so I can carry
Nice.
all kinds of loose paper. And then on the other side is a magnetized piece where all of my tools stick to it, so that I can sit it on my lap and nothing falls off my lap. And so that way it's never too precious. I just keep putting new paper in it. And then
Dude.
I used to always get frustrated too, because I'd start a new sketchbook and then I'm like, yeah, but I want to work on tone paper today. And I've got this white sketchbook with whatever. So that was one of the reasons I came up with this.
Mhm.
But the other reason is I hate when I ruin a sketchbook. I'm one of those people that if I do one bad drawing, I never want to look at the sketchbook again. I'm just not very good at
Yeah.
being kind to myself in that way.
Straight
So
up, me too. I'll
yeah.
be going along. And I remember once came up with some ideas for some stupid YouTube merch, like really dumb merch. And just a heads up, folks, that this stuff is so dumb. I just came up with the most. I've got like a really dumb sense of humor. And do you remember I don't know if you ever remember this meme, but there was a guy who was out the front of a gym, and he was going to like some beefcakes, some absolute ginormous dudes, and you just look at him and going, "Do you even lift, bro? Do you even lift?" And these guys were just going insane, just going, "What'd you say? Like, what'd you say to my face? Like, look at you, man. Your arms are spaghetti. Do you even lift, bro?" And it became this thing. And now, if you're listening to this,
Did you do a thing with, do you even paint?
no, you can't steal this. If you're listening to this podcast, it's already a thing now. It's already a thing, and it's coming. Like, do you even paint, bro? Do you even sketch, bro? And then another one, like, I often to my Patreon people, I refer to myself in the third person, because it's so dumb, it's hilarious. But I'm the Tish, and and I've got this hat coming that says, "Do you even Tish, bro?" Um,
Oh, no.
so I started.
So you're going through with this.
Oh, dude, I'm going all the way. It's got to be. It's like
You're not selling it very well.
I'm terrible. Like, I'll make a dumb joke in a YouTube video, and I'll tell my editor, "It's like, do you want to cut that out?" I'm like, "No, it stays," because I'm just cracking myself up over here. But that's me. That's just I've got a
Oh
dumb
man,
sense of
that's
humor.
funny.
But the thing is that I started sketching up these stupid little graphics and logos and stuff in my good sketchbook. Like, you're going, "Oh, nice little barn. That's really cool." And there was even some stuff that was even, a little bit spiritual, where I kind of put the cross on a barn. And then I had like 12 sheep, and I was doing like a little graphite study for something that I wanted to do that was kind of biblical. And then the next page you turn it over and it's like, "Do you even Tish, bro?" I'm like, come on, dude, I'm not touching the sketchbook ever again. That's it.
That's classic.
But
Man.
it's that's so cool, man. Like, thinking of these hacks and ways that make your artistic walk a little bit easier. I love that. I love
Well,
that.
the other cool thing about it is I'm gonna totally throw him under the bus, but
Do it.
if you ever hear this, James Gurney, you kind of had it coming to you. But he drew me a couple times to the Portrait Society of America conference, and they're freaking cool drawings. And it's like, I mean, come on. I mean, if he draws you, you're gonna want that. I mean, it's James Gurney, for crying out loud. So of course I go over to him and I want it. And what does he say? He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's in my sketchbook. I can't really take it out." And I'm like, "Come on, I'll pay you any amount of money He's like, no, I'm sorry, it's in my sketchbook. And he did that like 3 times because he's drawn me like 3 or 4 times. It kills me. I'm like, just give me the drawing. I'll cut it for you. You'll never even notice. And he's like, no, I can't do it. It's in my sketchbook. So
Wow.
that's, and
Thanks,
for
James.
me, I don't sell a lot of drawings, but that's the other thing is occasionally someone will want a drawing and I have to rip up a sketchbook. I've got one of my favorite sketchbooks that's just torn to bits because it had to be unbound to get some drawings out of it. And so I'm just like, from now on, loose leaf paper, no more sketchbooks for me. And so that's another reason I wanted to make something like that.
I'm doing now more and more, like I've got the Sketch Endeavor series that I've
Yeah.
started on YouTube, and more I'm doing those like loose, quick sketches in just cheaper books because I'm like, no, I'm not going to get precious with this thing. So I think it'd be that loose leaf. That's a great way, kind of around that. I
Yeah,
can see.
that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd love to find something. I was talking to Joe Paquette about some toned paper sketchbooks, and I'm thinking about getting some of those because I'm loving the toned paper. But anyway, look, I just we can geek out about that. What I really want to ask you about, right? So you've got this style. Let's get a bit technical here with the painting and the drawing. Tell me tell me a little bit more about your approach to the portrait from a technical point of view. Because again, I'm looking at this. You use color and texture and impasto, and there's a real sculptural quality to it. And then it's loose. It feathers out beautifully towards the edges of some of these pieces. Tell me about your approach to the portrait. Now, I'd also really love to hear about your decisions about who to paint because I just want to throw this one thing in there that I
Mhm.
get a lot of people. So there's people that follow through the private Facebook page that's associated with my Patreon, or they'll show me some of their work, maybe on social media or whatever. The amount of celebrity portraits I'm seeing, I'm just like, hey, who's around you? Who do you know? Oh, it's just my family or whatever. You need to draw and paint your family, like
Yeah,
straight up.
really.
Like, don't go drawing the Joker or Angelina Jolie. This has been done. Just go and paint who really matters to you, like in your immediate circle. I'm imagining that's who you're painting. That's people you know, right?
Well, that one you pointed out was one of my apprentices. He's
Wow.
older than me, but I have apprentices from 16 to 65.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yeah, he just one of the deals that they make when they study with me is they have to be willing to pose for me. But he actually ended up buying that one. So yeah, I paint my friends. You know, I'm drawn to older women, which is weird. You know, a lot of artists that I admire paint beautiful women, like Casey Barr, or Jeremy Lipking, and various other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know it's great market because they sell like hotcakes, but I
Mhm.
just, for some reason, I'm drawn to the character and the shapes and the forms of older skin and
Yeah,
then the
man.
women. I mean, I like older people in general because of that, but I mean, maybe it's because I'm a man. I prefer painting women, but I don't know. I probably read into my psyche a little bit there, but I also I find that if I hang a man in my house, I'm going to get eaten alive by all the feminists out there. But I find if I hang a man in my house, it's a little more intimidating, a little more threatening, right? There's
Okay.
something to me a little more calming about a portrait of a woman. So
Well,
maybe,
let me just add this then, because I got to say, there's a certain power and grace to this painting that you've done of Judith, which is the first one you'll see in your
yeah,
portfolio.
yeah.
Now, for people watching the video version of the podcast, exclusively on Patreon, then you'll see I'm going to cut in here an image of this painting with Jeff's permission here. But this portrait is absolutely exquisite, and there is she's beautiful. Like, I mean, okay, look, not to take away from Casey Barr or Lip King or
No, they're amazing.
they're
Yeah.
amazing dudes and amazing painters. But I get that totally. There's a market for that. But you know, you're authentically going after this thing that is touching something in you. You can see that exploration there. There's a truth and a power that's coming through on the canvas, man. It's really
Oh, thanks.
it's so good. So I'm drawn to that as well. Like I mean, I've got a crusty old dude sitting right there in my studio, and that's Russell
Hmm.
Petherbridge from Yandoid, a sculptor. wearing an unironed shirt. There's something about that, man. I was just like, yeah, I got to paint this. That's so cool. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, he's not, but to me, that they're beautiful people. The old people are
They
beautiful
are. I
people. The
love painting the
story.
wrinkles and the folding
Oh
skin.
man.
It's just so interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, people who paint beautiful women and men, young people, could be equally authentic. It's just not what I'm drawn to as a painting subject. So not usually. I love painting my kids when I do religious paintings, putting them in paintings. I mean, a lot of it comes down to the mood I'm in that particular day as well. But I feel like you
Mm.
asked a question and I got way off base on it though.
Dude, this is a series of dirt roads in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
This is the
Yeah.
podcast. Welcome. Look, I let me ask you, seeing as you went there just now, though, with religious paintings. So you would consider yourself so you're a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So me too. And I've
Hmm.
often thought about this, like, because I do want to do a series of biblical paintings. How do you approach that subject, and what are some
No,
of the themes
it's
there
hard.
that are really that are important to you? What are you exploring there? What are some of the things that go through your mind as an artist?
Well, to other Christians, this might make a lot of sense. To some people, maybe not. But for me, I've found that if I'm not doing something that's bigger than myself on occasion, that I'm just not happy. Because being an artist is a really selfish career. Like everyone wants to know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're inspired to do. And it's just it's a kind of a me lifestyle. Oh, I don't feel like painting today. Well, you're not supposed to paint when you're not inspired, where everyone else is just slaving at work. They got to get up at 7, they got to get to work, right? So for me, it keeps me grounded to do something that's more meaningful and that's bigger than myself. And that's part of the reason I'm drawn to the religious subject matter. The other reason I'm drawn to it is because it's like the stories are just, it's a story that's me. Not only is it meaningful, but it's content that I couldn't create on my own and still communicate with a broader audience, right? So if I were to come up with a narrative myself, no one would understand it. But this is a narrative that's meaningful to me, that teaches me something, but it's also meaningful to millions and millions of other people in the world. And it's a common language that we share, which I think is pretty awesome. So it's a
Yeah.
subject matter that it's hard not to be interested in, for me anyway.
Mm.
And there's so much drama in the stories. I mean, I'm always tempted to do the most dramatic stories in the Bible, and but some of them I'm also afraid to do, which is why I haven't done a lot of them, because they're very intimidating. I mean, they're so complex. Like
Oh
right now, I'm
man.
working on the crucifixion. I've put that off for 20 years,
Yeah.
and it's tough. Like it's heavy stuff. If especially if you believe it, like I do.
Mhm.
Like you don't want to screw this thing up. It's not like I'm going to go to
Yeah.
hell if I screw it up, but it's meaningful. Like I want to do my best work, right, on something that's so meaningful to me.
Mhm.
And if I'm just painting a friend, yeah, that's a friend and that's meaningful too, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the same emotional weight. And so they're intimidating to do. And this particular painting is like 13 feet tall.
Mhm.
Christ stands about 8 feet tall on the cross. I mean, the cross is more than 8 feet, but he's from head to toe 8 feet tall. So it's bigger than life. And man, it's an intimidating painting to approach from day to day.
That's
So
amazing. And
yeah.
what I'll do for the podcast is I'll cut in here your painting Triumphal Entrance, 2016. This painting, there is so much going on, like let alone the perspective and the architecture. I mean, good night. Dude, I'd love to hear technically how you went
Oh, this
about this.
painting was a
So
nightmare.
so for the people listening to this, I'll describe what we're looking at. So it's a scene of Jesus entering on a donkey, and there are all these figures everywhere, and we are taking a view almost as if we're seated here right here in the foreground, there's a woman who's turning around to look at us. We're at almost her eye level. So you've got this subtle perspective shift where you're looking up at the figures that are standing. They diminish off into space, but then you've got this triumphal arch with the Corinthian capitals on top of this building. Dude, the perspective alone, the stonework, and every individual character with expressions on, yeah, like this is a portrait of portrait. Dude, there's like how many figures in here? Like 64, 60?
There's about 50.
Oh,
I
dude.
think there's 49. I just
Oh,
missed the
wow.
50 mark. But if you lump all the pigeons together, that equals one person. So we'll say 50.
We'll say 50.
Yeah.
And beautifully well painted, I've got to say as well. Like they just add another spark of life. Then you've got, the figure up on the balcony throwing the lilies down, the palm fronds, like the light in it. Come on, man. So
Oh
tell
man,
me,
I'm glad you like it.
tell me
It
about
was
this. I
tough.
love
That was
it. No, well, look, I try to do ambitious stuff, not like this. This
well,
is
it was more
nuts,
ambitious
man.
than you probably realize because it was
Yeah.
all done from life or imagination. So
Wow.
there's no photo reference at all. And it took me 2
Oh, wow.
years. See, for 13 years, I never worked from photos at all. Back in 2008, I realized I was plateauing in my painting skills. And so I theorized that if I added resistance, I'd build strength. And that theory proved to be true. There's no doubt. I don't regret it at all. So I took the next 13 years and never used a photo. And man, it was tough. I had some tough times trying to create 50 figure paintings with donkeys and pigeons without photos. But it was the building, I had to build that in miniature. And then the perspective drawing alone took 3 weeks, drawing it on paper. And then I had to project it onto the 8-foot canvas, and not project with a projector, but like I had to redraw it on an 8-foot canvas.
Okay, but why? Okay, let me ask you though, if it's your drawing, why not project it with a projector, Jeff?
Because it would distort it. I mean, you go through all that effort, and that's a valid point. And I probably wouldn't have
Wow.
ethical
Okay.
ethical reason to not do that because I already drew it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it would slightly bend the lines more than
Okay.
likely.
Okay.
And you'd be
Yep.
surprised when you blow something up and when you go through all that effort to make a perfect mathematically accurate perspective drawing, if
Mhm.
you're off by millimeters, it screws up everything. So it
Mm.
wasn't an option. I had to
Okay.
redraw it. The reason I didn't originally draw it on the canvas is because I frankly I didn't know what it was going to entail. So I didn't want to, run into all these problems on an 8-foot canvas. I wanted to figure out the problems first and then go at it with a lot more knowledge on the big canvas. But then I kept referring back to that perspective drawing to figure out what size each figure was in space. So I'd have to, every time I added a figure, I'd invite a new model in, I'd figure out where they were in the space, calculate their size, blow it up 6 times onto the canvas. And they had to be literally down to the millimeter and standing in the right place or it wouldn't work. And then, it was tedious. The donkey, I had to go to a donkey, sculpt it, bring it back, light the sculpture.
Oh, man.
The birds, same thing. The birds I actually caught from a Sears parking lot. I trapped them and then I let them go though. So all you PETA nuts out there, don't worry.
Okay. No pigeons were hurt in the making of this painting.
No, they weren't. No, they were happy pigeons. But yeah, we went through a lot of crazy stuff. And man, pigeons are rats with wings, man. They were nasty. But yeah, we went through a lot of effort. I say we because my assistants would hold the pigeons while I painted them, But the donkey I couldn't bring in. So I had to go to the donkey and sculpt it and then bring the sculpture back in and light it. And then kind of improvise on putting Jesus on it. And, it was really a major Frankenstein project, just bits and pieces, Frankensteining everything together. And it's hard for me to appreciate because I see, how it is. I see all of my tracks. I know exactly how it was done. And so I overanalyze it, but it was a lot of work. And now COVID forced me to start working from photography again because no one would model for me or could model for me.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and I'm 47 years old now, and I feel like I've learned what I'm going to learn from working from life for 13 years.
Okay.
So I'm actually really embracing kind of moving back into photography and just like chilling out a little bit. and painting is hard with no matter how you do it. But I will say that it has been a huge blessing to implement photography again, because it's it's doing all of that preliminary work and dealing with moving models and children and moving animals and stuff. It's exhausting. It is
Oh yeah,
absolutely
man.
exhausting.
So
But
who's commissioning these works, or how do
no,
you,
that's
or is it just all personal projects that you just really would love to do? Is that?
every now and then my church will commission one,
Mhm.
but most of them are personal. And then I end up selling them privately, believe it or not. Yeah.
Yeah,
So my
awesome.
church is, they own about 4 or 5 of my paintings. That's about it.
Wow, man.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
I just want to make mention of another one. Just, again, I love the story. Like you, love Jesus, but just from a painting point of view, just from a technical point of view, this anointing at Bethany 2018, dude, like that, you knocked it out of the park with that painting.
Oh,
Just,
thanks.
I want people to see that from just the quality of the light and the contrast and the way that composition works. It's just beautiful.
I
But
appreciate that.
tell me about that project. So again, life models. I got to just say, on a side note, wow, what an incredible challenge to set for yourself and go, I'm not going to learn, I'm not going to use photo reference. Like, even though you might be you've changed your policy now, but for the time, that's really interesting, because I've always really relied on it quite heavily for just about everything. But the other thing I tried to do was own that reference and not feel bound by it, but use it, but
Right.
just go what I call off script. So whenever I say I'm going off script, means I've got my initial seed of an idea or something, and then I found reference to support it, but it won't be from one photo. It'll change it up a bit. I'll use like a little bit of that tree. I like the way the light's hitting that bark, or I like something about this over here. So I'll very much take that Frankenstein approach in a way, when it comes to using reference. But man, what a challenge to set yourself. I imagine that pressure does build that resilience in an artistic way. That's awesome, man.
It does, and the hardest part is the drawing aspect. Because, let me backtrack a little. So one of the things I discovered, which a lot of people don't realize, particularly when you're going for multi-figure painting, not always for a portrait, but for me personally, also for a portrait. And I can get into that when we talk more about, you mentioned my color and everything. We can talk more about that. But even from life, I don't follow the script, so to speak, right? I rarely copy even from life. What I copy are exact proportions because I want a likeness, but I'm always taking liberties in light and color and things. So, but when you deal with multi-figure, then you're putting someone in a studio, but they're supposed to be standing outside, right? And they're supposed to be standing next to someone else, which means that they're going to get reflected light from another person, but there's only them standing in there. And then it's like there's all these other components that aren't present, right? So you're never, even working from life with a complex painting like that, you're never painting what you see. You're always drawing what you see, but you're never painting what you see. So yeah, it's a lot of improv, painting improv. But the thing that really, I think the two things, there are two ways that I grew the most with doing this for 13 years. One is my drawing skills, because you have to draw fast when you're working from animals and children that move, right? You have to be fast and accurate. The first time I drew a child from life for one of these complex paintings, I was almost in tears because they would not hold still at all. It happened to be my daughter. She would not hold still. And people say things like, why don't you make them watch TV, or why don't you have them do this? And I'm like, no one really gets it. Like, you can't have a kid watch TV because then they get this zoned out look on their face, right? And it's not natural. And half the time in a multi-figure painting, you want them to be acting in some form, right? You want them to look a certain way. So there is no way around it, but just to say, hold this pose the way I'm asking you to hold it. So what I found myself doing was drawing for 10 seconds, giving them a 5-minute break, drawing for 10 seconds, giving them a 5-minute break. And in the 5 minutes, I'm drawing from memory, right? And then they come back for 10 seconds and I fix everything that I remembered wrong, you know? So you learn a lot about drawing when you're drawing under those conditions. And so now,
hang on, ow, my brain just short circuited. You're drawing for 10 seconds. Did I hear that right? 10 seconds and then a 5-minute break.
yeah, well, look at, maybe I'm exaggerating. It might be 30
Wow.
seconds, less
Okay.
than a minute, you know, it might be 30 seconds.
Oh,
It depends on the person, but look at, and take that painting that you've mentioned with the, oh, now I'm forgetting my own title. The one with triumphal entry, excuse me.
Yeah, triumphal entrance.
You take that painting and look at all the people holding their arms in the air and smiling and laughing and everything else. They can't hold those poses, right? So they do it for as long as they can, and then I work from memory for a while. Then they'll do it for a few minutes, and then I'll work from memory for a while. And then with the kids, it's even worse, right? So you take my son, who's up on top of that guy's head with his hands on his head like that. So he was sitting on top of a mannequin and then supported by ropes and stuff. But he wouldn't hold that for more than 5 seconds at a time. He'd constantly be complaining, this, that, and the other. So you kind of have to work from memory a lot. So now when I'm drawing from a real person that actually holds still in a classroom type environment, it's like, or from a photograph, it's like, this is too much. I mean, this is a gift, you know? So I learned a lot. It was really boot camp for drawing. But the other thing is just being exposed to accurate lighting, accurate color, what real flesh and what real flesh is supposed to look like, and the way light really behaves before it's seen through the lens of a camera, right? And that's all I looked at for 13 years. So I feel like that's always hopefully going to stick with me now that I'm using photography more. I'll still work from life too, but now that I'm using photography more, I think that hopefully that'll stick with me and really inform my work. I'm a true believer, because I worked from photography for quite a few years before I did this. And I don't believe that working from life is superior. In fact, I think some of the greatest painters who ever lived were in the 19th century, and none of them, Waterhouse, Eakins, none of them worked from life. You know, they all worked from photography.
That's really
So
interesting, because there was daguerreotypes at the time, or if I'm pronouncing
Yeah.
that right, and there not many people actually realize that a lot of these painters from that period of time, they were even sharing photo reference, you know, amongst
Yeah.
themselves, like, and you'd see images come up in multiple paintings by different artists. But that's a fascinating period of time. Let me ask you, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm looking more, and I'm just totally geeking out here about, you know, even some of these family portraits. There seems to be a real Rockwell vibe in some of them, the family ones. But who are some of your hero artists? Who are some of the people that you're really, that you hold in high esteem? Let me ask you this way. I've asked a few people this. It's always fascinating. Who's on your Mount Rushmore of art heroes from the past?
Oh man, that's always the hardest question, because there's so many.
Tons, right?
Well, I mentioned one of them, and that's Waterhouse. Yeah. Rembrandt, I studied him for a long time. That just the way Rembrandt could describe form. I mean, his figures just came right off the canvas. You know, I don't love everything that every artist does, right? You know, Rembrandt was sort of a clumsy draftsman. I'm going to get hung alive for that one, but his paintings were, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever painted as good as he did, but who else of dead artists? Solomon J. Solomon. I don't know. There's so many. There's so many that I really like.
I didn't know who that was until really quite, like, just a few days ago. I'm ashamed.
Oh, no kidding.
Dude, I saw an original, but I never twigged that was and I'll see if I can put it into the podcast here, of me in front of this painting by Solomon J. Solomon. I can't even remember the title, but the original is in New Zealand, of the guy carrying the girl down from the plinth. I can't remember the name of the title.
Oh, I don't remember. I know the painting, but yeah.
You know, it's massive. Dude, it is
really
huge. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering right, it's hanging in Auckland, New Zealand, the original.
Really?
Stunning.
I've never seen an original. I would love to see an original one of his paintings.
But I didn't put the name to it. But what an amazing painter, you know? Yeah. So,
well, my favorite period is the 19th century. I mean, they had, I mean, the advent advent of the camera really changed things. I mean, all of a sudden, every figure was precisely drawn. I mean, in that, you mentioned daguerreotype. What they did in the 19th century was the best of both worlds. What cameras do is they take the drawing problem out of the equation. Like, you still need to know how to draw, right? But you don't have the problems of figuring out how to draw a baby or figuring out how to, I remember all the big headed, weird adult looking babies from before the camera.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Yeah.
worry about drawing a smile, although Velasquez did a great smile. He did a few paintings with people smiling that are mind blowing. But the camera made it so that 19th century painters could just almost capture people in motion, everyday, real life people. But they didn't have color. So they still had to rely on real life for color. And that to me is the best of both worlds, right? And so the 19th century to me is that's just the best of the best. They did some great work in that period. I think today the difficulty is and you talked about this, the difficulty is to move past the photo, because now the photo is getting so good, it's tempting to not just copy the photo, right? It's so good. And so you see lots of paintings that are photos. They're photos. And ironically, sometimes a painter will paint a photo to look like a photo, and then they'll do prints of the painting that look like the photo. So now you have a photo of a painting that looks like a photo, and they sell the photo of the painting that looks like a photo.
It's like photo.
It's a
photo
bizarre kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's,
wow.
and I'm not being critical. I'm just saying it's tempting. It's like, because now our reference is almost too good, right? I mean, with digital cameras and HDR photography and how we can really broaden the dynamic range beyond what we ever could even 15 years ago. It's like, it's so good now that I think it's our job as artists to really make it something else, right? Make our paintings, make them something else. And that's hard to do.
I'm gonna bring up another painting here that is just stunning. The Johnsons, 2009.
Oh, I love that one. That's one of
Oh
my favorites.
man, it is so good. It is so good. This little boy moving the marble, looking back towards the viewer, the startled look on the daughter's face. The older boy leaning in, going, "Okay, what are you doing, Bucko?" This is the energy here. Tell me about that painting. So here are your again. I'm assuming you're going to be doing a lot of this stuff from life, but how do you, if you're
No, okay.
okay? So
I'll
if you're
be honest with you.
okay,
These aren't from life.
okay,
No, these
okay,
aren't from life.
interesting. So
So most of these were done before I made the switch. Most of these were done previous to 2008.
wow.
Or this one might have been later, but this woman was from Hawaii and she didn't have the ability to stay to do it from life because her family is from Hawaii. So yeah, so that one is definitely, I can't remember when. Does it have a date on it? I think it was pre 2008.
2009.
Oh, 2009.
You've
Yeah,
got here.
no, that
But
one was done from photos.
man,
So, but you had mentioned earlier that, you see a Norman Rockwell vibe, but what's really interesting is it's actually Wayne Thiebaud that was my main influence back then.
Wayne Thiebaud. Okay, that's a
Yeah.
new one for me. That's a new one for
You
me.
don't know Wayne Thiebaud?
No, I'm really
No, look
showing
him
my
up. He
ignorance
just
here.
passed
Yeah.
away. He just passed away.
Okay.
He's the one who's he was a pop artist. I don't know. I
Mhm.
still don't know why they call him a pop artist. He was of that period, but he did the cakes in the bakery windows. They would always have like really blue shadows. Tebow's really hard to spell. Don't ask me how to spell it. Maybe
Thie
that might be it.
Thie Baud Thiebaud. I would
There
never
you go.
Thiebaud.
Yeah.
Wayne Thiebaud. Okay.
It's really, I would never be able to spell it. So I was looking at Wayne Thiebaud when
Really
I started
interesting.
doing paintings like that. And I loved the way, I mean, obviously mine are different and people don't make that connection. But what I liked was the graphic quality of his paintings, the way it was the subject and the subject alone. Right.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the painting was about design. So he'd paint these cakes and then he would design he would use the shadows as part of the design element. And if you notice in some of these figurative portraits, then I really have fun with the shadows and creating. I did it differently than he did because his was very very much about color. I mean, mine are too, but his shadows were very much about exaggerating color and
Mhm.
long fluid strokes, where mine are really graphic and much more about shape. But I was
Right.
definitely influenced by him. And I probably was influenced by Norman Rockwell because I am a fan, but I didn't know it. But how do you, I mean, I think so many people have said it, it has to be true, right? But I didn't know it at the time when I started painting these family portraits. I had no idea if that is the case. But, we don't live in a bubble, right? And sometimes we
Yeah.
don't even know who we're being influenced by. And I am without a doubt a fan of Norman Rockwell.
Well,
So,
I tell you what,
yeah.
though, like, because Norman Rockwell, like, okay, so just a giant, in painting terms, amazing work. And I'm still really influenced by him, although I don't paint like him at all. But there's a certain truth to what he did that I really enjoy.
Hmm.
And I think that authenticity and that truth comes through when you're actually over the target. And this I love your approach to the family portrait, because this is, I imagine a lot of these are commissioned, and
Yeah,
I
all of them
I
are.
I
Yeah.
I I just I turn them all down. I get asked all the time, can you, no, no, I'm
Oh,
not
I love them.
I'm not
I'll
painting you.
take them.
But now I'm looking at it going, it's so how are you doing this? And again, I want people, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not watching the video version of the podcast exclusively on Patreon, if you're listening to the audio version, then go to Jeff Hines' website, jeffhine.com. Look at the portfolio, and under the family portraits tab, you're going to see some beautiful portraits. We got Bus Stop. We've got Who's the Boss? I love that. Look at the dart in the middle of her forehead. That's hilarious. The Riches. So how do you go about this process? Because this is fun. This is imagination. This is, so they obviously, once you start doing a few of these, people are like, "Oh, we get Jeff Hein to paint our family portrait.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate.
Look how fun he
Yeah.
makes it. This is great." So tell me
Yeah.
about this process.
So
How do
you
go
had
for it?
mentioned this sense of your weird sense of humor. Well, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
sort of the same way.
Yeah.
And, and we'd also talked about religious art and how meaningful it is. And so family portraits have also been a meaningful thing to me, because my family is the most important thing on this planet to me, my kids and my wife. And so when I see other families and the joy that they have, it's sort of like, I don't know, it just feels good to be part of that and to capture that in paint. I know it sounds really corny, but sorry, that's how it is. So the sad thing is, total tangent, I haven't done my family yet, and my kids are 18, and I got to get on it. But my
Wow.
twins are
Wow.
18. But
Wow.
anyway, so I've always gravitated toward family portraits as well. But in the beginning of my career, I was told that family portraits were for the gestures who come in the back door and leave through the back door. Like, they're not, they're for low class artists, right? Because they're commissions and you're told what to do. I was told this by another artist who I admired at the time. And so I rejected them for a long time too. But then my gallery, the one I had mentioned earlier that worked so hard for me, they kept calling me and saying these people wanted to do these portraits. The reason why is because I was doing these non-commissioned figurative paintings, which I think are also on my website, the older ones. And people were visualizing their family in those positions, in those paintings. And they thought it would be interesting. And so they were inquiring, and I kept turning them down. And again, this was all like in the first year of my career. And then my dealer's like, you have any idea what kind of work you're turning away? And you've got a family. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing fine. It's all good, And anyway, eventually he got me thinking, maybe I'll give it a shot. But because I felt comfortable where I was in my career and financially and everything, I went into it with a real, like, this is how it's going to be attitude, my way or the highway kind of attitude. And so my first portrait, I said, look, I will choose the concept, I will choose the clothing, I will choose the composition. Pay me half down. If you don't like it, I'll keep it in the painting. If you do, then you pay me the rest and I'll deliver the painting. And they took it. So that's how I've run it ever since. And frankly, I think
Brilliant.
they like it better that
Brilliant.
way.
Awesome.
I don't know. I think they don't want to be involved. They want to know they're hiring a professional that is better at their job than they would be. Right. And
It's,
so,
hang
you
on a
know,
second.
someone,
That right there. I'm sorry to keep cutting you off, Jeff, but you're hitting these pain points for me that, like, I just told my agent, I'm like, commissions are closed. I'm not doing this, and I'm sorry. I just, but he's like, and he came to me, and I apologize to him right now because he might be listening to this episode. He's like, you're making it very difficult for me, Andrew. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's
so
like, we
try
got,
this, try it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah. I mean, we've got a similar process of taking a deposit, non-refundable, but they could transfer it to another painting for sure. But there was a project that just came through, and I said, no, I'm not doing it. And he's like, "No, think about it, think about it." He called me a couple of days later. He's like, so what about the project? I said, I'm still not doing it. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I like your approach to this because you're taking something that's so personal and unique, that's outside of the norm for so many artists, and you're owning it. You're owning it. It's like you want to get your family painted by Jeff Hein because look what he does with it. It's amazing, dude.
Well, and I will turn down commissions. If someone comes to me
Sure.
and they seem like a high maintenance client, I'll turn them down in a heartbeat. If they're like, hey, I've got these pictures of my grandparent, this happens all the time. Pictures of my dead grandparents I want you to paint. I'll say, no, sorry, I'm not interested. Or they'll come and say, I want you to paint, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I'll say, well, no, I didn't have it. It's not something I've thought about. Maybe if I do it someday, you can buy it, but not interested, because I want to paint religious paintings that I want to paint. Right. So, and it's
For sure.
so
For sure.
I will turn stuff down if they tell me what to paint. Right. But with a family portrait, they don't. The way it's set up, the way I've set it up is they just say, here is my family. And that's the end of it. Right. And so, and because I like family, I'm good with that. I mean, a family's a family, right? So I'm good with that. It's almost like saying, here is the Bible. Now you choose, right? That would be the same if it were a religious piece. They're not saying, here is my family. I want them in my backyard. I want them all wearing pink dresses. I want da 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 da. No, they're saying, here's my family. Go. So what I do is then I just interview all of them about each other. Actually, I interview the commissioners about everyone else. So if the mom and dad are commissioning the family, I'll interview the mom about the whole family and the dad, and I'll interview the dad about the whole family and the mom. And then I take that information and I come up with a narrative. And then I present the narrative to them. And this is the point where they can reject it. I'm not unreasonable, right?
That's awesome.
I present the narrative to them in a tiny little sketch, like a 2x2 thing in my sketchbook, and say, here it is. And I describe the concept to them. I've never had anyone turn me down, but they could if they wanted to, I suppose. And then what I would do at that point is just do it again, right? But at that point, once they've approved the sketch, then what I do is I go to their home and they walk me from room to room and I go through their clothes and I pick out clothes that'll work for the composition. And I start laying their clothes out on their living room floor and designing the composition based on the sketch. I design the colors and the values on their living room floor with the clothes. And then when it's all done, I say, bring these clothes with you next week. We'll do the shoot. And then they come in and we do the shoot. And then that's how it works. So yeah, it's a blast.
That's
and
so
so I
cool.
like that one with the
Wow.
dart on the forehead.
Yeah.
I did the interview, but what I've noticed wasn't what this concept came not from the interview, but from my exposure to them in their home. Actually, not in their home. They're from Nashville, but in my studio, where it was clear that that little boy was in charge, right? And then the girl in the blue was like a second mom to the little boy. And she was like super trying to take control. She felt to me, it seemed like that girl was like, okay, this kid's out of control. Let me take control of this kid, but in reality, he still controlled the family. And the dad, he was a workaholic and he was always in his own world. And he always had these index cards and was always taking notes while everyone else was going on with their business, So the dart is symbolic of the kid saying, hey, you know what? You're not in charge of me. You're not my second mom. And here's a dart in the forehead to show you, it's symbolic of his power. Right. And that's why he's on the one side of the canvas having all of that presence while the rest of the family is on the other side. And so it's just fun to see the family dynamics and come up with unique concepts. The other one you mentioned was Bus Stop. That one was the girl, her nickname was Squirrel because she was a space case. They said they all agreed, and she did too, that she was a daydreamer, which I can relate to. I'm the same
Oh,
way.
wow. Yeah.
So I put the squirrel in there, getting into lipstick in order to provide a distraction for her and also to symbolize her nickname, but then have the mom talking to her and have her not listening, but being distracted by the thing that represents her nickname because she's always distracted. So, and then there's some other little things in there that describe their family dynamics as well. But
Wow.
that's
Wow.
the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. And they're super fun to do. And most people, well, everyone so far has been really happy with them. So
That's what a great, yeah, yeah. And again, for the video version of the podcast, I've cut some of these paintings in here so people can enjoy these. They're just stunning. One more here that is just an insane piece, dude. Consumed 2010 oil on canvas,
oh yeah.
96 by 72 inches,
Yeah,
people.
that was brutal.
No, no kidding. Painted from life, I'm going to assume.
Yeah, it was painted from life. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay,
The
so describe what we're looking at here.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The setup for that took me
Yeah.
about several weeks.
Oh
So I had to
man.
build basically a wall,
Yeah.
but it was about 12 inches thick. And then I laid several layers of chicken wire stretched through the wall,
Wow.
so that I could layer the still life. Because if you just do one layer, it's not it just doesn't have presence, right? It's just
Hmm.
all surface. So there's actually layers of objects. So then I just worked from the back forward. But what was difficult about it was as you design it, you had to take things down to move things in the back and put things back in the front. So, and then everything's just kind of wired to the big contraption. But what I did was I sent out an email to all of my friends and clients and said, bring your vices, bring everything that you have to me so that I can put it in this still life. And it was during the 2008 recession, which I don't know, you're in New Zealand, correct? Yeah. So I don't
Yeah.
know how
Yeah.
how you fared out there, but in
Well,
America it
I,
was
I
pretty
was
bad.
I was in Australia at the time when that hit.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, yeah. I moved to New Zealand in 2017 from Australia.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was during that recession. And so we had bought a home, and I have always been really responsible with money and everything and bought well below my means when we bought our house. And then all of a sudden, everything that we owned was going down in value. And I was really irritated by society, and everyone's blaming the banks. And I'm thinking, why the hell did you buy a house you couldn't afford? Are you too stupid? I mean, because I remember when I went to the banks, they said, why are you buying a house that's this much? If you do this, this, and this, you can get a house that's twice as big. And I said to them, I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to get in over my head. So then the recession comes and everyone's blaming the banks. And I'm just like, no, this is a societal problem. You people all let them give you more money than you could afford to take. And so this painting was me venting for 6 months about the materialism of the world. And I know it's me being too preachy here, but I know we all have our issues, but at the time I was so stressed out about that the art market was falling apart and everything was a mess. And so that's what that painting was about.
Hmm.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
I never suffered too much from the recession, but I was afraid that I would. And this painting shows that. I mean, my experience painting this reflected that because I was very stressed out when I was painting it. But fortunately, I took a sabbatical to learn how to paint from life and differently in 2008 to 2011. So coincidentally, it had nothing to do with the recession. And so I literally was living on savings anyway from 2008 to 2011. So I completely dodged a recession. And then when I got back from the recession, this was the first painting I did post sabbatical. And then that one sold and things were fine. So I stressed for nothing, but that was my piece to vent the societal greed and materialism that I perceived, right or wrong, at the time.
I mean, this painting is just, it really does reflect that, man. It's so, I mean, not just, I appreciate it purely from a technical point of view, but I see it's almost like, when you're looking at a painting, you reflect something of yourself in there. I mean, all of us have a closet that looks like this, or of stuff
Hmm.
that we just don't want to get rid of or throw away, or stuff that we've consumed or whatever. I keep like so much old crap around. And some of it, like recently, I went and bought other people's crap just so I could feel nostalgic about my past, because I got rid of my crap. Like I got like toys here from the friggin' 80s, bro, just sitting here on the desk. I mean, look what I've got sitting
Oh, I
here on my
know.
desk. I love it. I love it. You know what that is. Come on.
Of
What
course, the DeLorean. Yeah, right.
thank you. I shout out Talia Stanton. I interviewed Talia Stanton, who's 22 and absolutely killing it in the art world. But she's like, that's the Mandalorian? I nearly hung up on her.
The Mandalorian. That's
Oh, wow.
funny.
Yeah, dude.
Oh,
It's
man.
I man, it's so cool to just have this chance to connect with you and hear a bit more about your story and your work. As I said before, I've been admiring your work from afar for a long time, and it's just so good to have a chance to talk with you. I appreciate it all the
Same.
more now.
Appreciate that.
It's just so cool, man. Where I'll let people know, but where's the best place for people to find you and follow you online and connect with you, and also
Um,
tell us what's next for you. What are some of the things that we can look forward to coming from the studio? What are some of the epic projects that you're looking forward to getting into?
well, as you mentioned, I am teaching online. That's a new thing. And that's been fun. It's kind of an experiment because I've never taught online before and I didn't know how it worked out, but my students are growing fast and it's been really cool. So I do that every Friday. I have a class at 11:30, 2:30, and 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. As far as the painting goes, there's always this Life of Christ series, Life and Ministry of Christ series that I'll be working on probably my whole life, just picking away at that. And then I'm thinking I've been out of gallery since my sabbatical in 2008, 2010 or 11. And I've been living on just the residue of my years before that, just clients and stuff that I'd already built up. But I'm kind of itching to get back into the gallery scene and start a new body of work. So I'm not sure, I think that's going to be in my future. I'm not sure how far into my future, but I am really itching to start a new body of work. And I'm not even sure what that's going to look like yet. So, and as far as I think I'm most active on Instagram, but I'm not active anywhere really. But my website is a little slower at updates, but that would be jeffhine.com. And my Instagram is jeffhineart. I think it's Jeff_Hein_art, if I remember correctly. And then I also have my other Instagram of all of my distractions and hobbies. That's Jeff Hein Studio. So that's the main ways to see what I'm doing.
Jeff Hein, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. What a blast. Thank you so much for being on The Creative Endeavor.
It's my pleasure. I'm a huge fan of your work and honored to be here.
Well, thank you so much. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast. A huge shout out and thank you to Jeff Hein for joining me. If you haven't done so already, go and follow Jeff Hein on Instagram at Jeff_Hein_art and on his website, www.jeffhine.com. Check out his exceptional work there and make sure you're following his efforts. I know you're going to be just as inspired as I am by this guy. He's just incredible. Now, if you haven't already done so, please take a moment and leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. It makes a huge difference to the show. And in addition to that, if you wouldn't mind sharing this episode on social media and let other people know where you're hearing these inspiring conversations. Help me spread the word to more people. I can't do it without you, and I just appreciate that extra effort. Again, if you missed it, there's an exclusive video version of this podcast. If you wanted to know about some of the paintings that we discussed in this episode, you'll find them on my Patreon page. And that link accompanies this podcast, but you'll find it by just searching my name on Patreon, Andrew Tischler Artist. Now I'm going to get out of here and get back to painting. It's been so much fun hanging out with you here in the studio. I'll be with you again very, very soon in another episode of The Creative Endeavor.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.